morning, everyone. Good morning. Happy Father's Day. So many, thanks. So many father presences in my life that are here today. My biological dad, Mike, is here in the back. He's been busy because he had his little girl get married yesterday, too. I remember, sorry to put you on the spot, Dad, I remember talking with my dad on my birthday and him expressing, I guess what some fathers do about, loving me, but wishing he had been able to provide more material good for me in my life. And it reminded me I've never wanted for a thing in my life. Isn't that a great thing a strong father model can do for us, to help us not need to want, to help provide us with our needs, to teach us that we don't need anything outside of us to fulfill them for us. So I thank you, Mom and Dad, for giving me everything that I needed to know who I am. And I think all the fatherly presences, male and female, in this room who help me know the truth of who I am, especially when I forget it, which is often. There's a great author by the name of Daniel Wallace who wrote a book called Big Fish. It was also made into a movie by Tim Burton. I guess it's a musical, I was informed too, and I didn't know that. But in the book, it's really about a man whose father is passing away, and he's really longing to know the truth of who his father is practically, historically. And the trouble is that his dad is full of tall tales. He seems to never tell the truth. He's always telling a story or a joke just when the son is really trying to find out, who is this man? And really, who am I myself? And at one point, nearing his death, the son isn't sure if he should leave the room. And so his dad says to him, I actually have a premonition about these kind of things, and really, I even know when I'm going to die. And son, it's not today, so go ahead and leave. The son can't help but believe his father. How do you know? He says. He thought, well, these premonitions started when I was a little boy. One night I woke up crying from a dream, and my own father came into the room, and I told him that I had dreamed Aunt Stacy had died. Don't worry, my father said. Aunt Stacy's fine. But the next day, Aunt Stacy died. A couple weeks later, I had another dream and woke up crying. And my father came to the room. What's the matter? I dreamt Grandpa died. Don't worry, Grandpa's fine. We'll call him tomorrow. The next day, Grandpa died. A couple weeks later, my father came into the room again. I was crying from a dream. I told him I dreamt my father died. Uh-oh. Don't worry about it, son. Everything's going to be okay. But I could see the sweat form on my father's brow, and all through the night, the steps going back and forth kept me from falling asleep at night. The next day, my father lived like an axe was going to fall on him at any time. When he came home that night, he said to his wife, I've had the worst day of my life. His wife replied, you think you had a bad day. The milkman dropped dead on the porch. The son, upon hearing this inartful joke at the inopportune moment, which may be not the best joke for a Father's Day sermon, I know, begins to leave in anger with his father calling after him. Don't you have a sense of humor? Can't you see I'm dying here? We have the beauty and the complexity of the father-child relationship, don't we? Learning to balance who our fathers want to be and who they really are, which as an expression of who they are is maybe part of what our life is about as well, both in a practical sense and in a spiritual sense as well. For all the faults the man's father has, you can't say he's not creative though, right? That's often to my response to someone who's been in fundamentalist religion for a long time is, for all of their faults, you can't say they're not creative. They come up, these religious people, with all sorts of cool myths and figures and rules and laws. It's creative stuff. And for all our own faults, hopefully each of you can say about yourself that at least you're creative. And we've been exploring that as our theme this month, creativity, to recognize I am a creative being and I build my life with divine ideas. I am not a victim of circumstances. I am a part of creative life itself. And who and how I choose to bring that creativity about can affect not only how I live, but the circumstances that take place around me. It can infuse my relationships with joy. It can fill me with a sense of wonder. It can call me to be my true self, the creative spirit in me. And so we want to continue to talk this morning about how we cultivate that sense of creativity. One of the most simple ways is, again, to recognize I am a creative being. Is to learn to approach our life with what we call the beginner's mind. How many of us are good at practicing a beginner's mind, of staying present to our life without defining the way it ought to be all the time? Nobody could. Honest crowd. Honest crowd. Not one hand. Jack Foster, in his book, How to Get Ideas, which is our book of the month, he talks about the importance of having a childlike mind. I like to call this being childlike without being childish. There's a wisdom in being childlike. He quotes the great physicist Oppenheimer, who said, "There are children playing in the streets who could solve some of my top problems in physics because they have modes of sensory perception that I lost years ago." Carl Sagan, the great scientist and TV show host, said, "Kids are natural-born scientists. First of all, they ask all the deep scientific questions. Why is the moon round? Why is the sky blue? What's a dream? Why do we have toes? Why do we have toes? What's the birthday of the world?" By the time they get into high school, they hardly ever ask questions like that. There's an inherent wisdom in being childlike and not being childish that not only allows us to see things freshly, but it also helps us to not get caught in that trap of having our logic make us dumb to the truths of life, dumb to not to what the symbols of life are pointing to, dumb to meaning. There's that aspect that a child can stand firmly in what they know and in what they don't know, and so they know the beauty of metaphor as well. The son who's struggling to know his father in Big Fish actually expresses some experience of this in the book. He talks about, as a child, them moving into their family home on Mayfair Avenue, and there being a swing set in the backyard, and he's so excited that he gets on the swing set and he starts swinging back and forth. And what he doesn't realize is that the swing set wasn't left for him. It's been unconnected from the ground, and the family just hasn't taken it with them yet. I was actually taking the weight of the set itself with me until, at the top of my highest arc, the set plunged forward, sending me out of the swing and on an unlikely trajectory toward a white picket fence on which I would assuredly have been impaled. Sorry for all the visuals today. Suddenly, I felt my father near me. It was as though he were flying too, and that we were both falling together. His arms embraced me like a cloak, and I came to rest on the ground beside him. He had plucked me from heaven and set me down safely on earth. What a wonderful metaphor for not only for many of us our own father figures, but also the divine, that we sometimes find ourselves flying, thinking we're all on our own, but there's that presence which can appear to be flying with us, that can help us land gently, even though we have perhaps found ourselves mistaken. The depth of creativity in our lives is thinking that we know. Thinking that we know. The birth of creativity is making all things new. When we can renew ourselves, we can renew our relationship with anything in our lives. A person, a circumstance, an aching body part, whatever it may be. When we renew ourselves, We can, in a sense, renew our relationship to something and sometimes even create an environment for that thing to be renewed itself. All through being willing to make ourselves new again. It's not an easy thing to do, but when we can learn to hold ourselves to the present instead of the past, we can begin to change our lives. When we can hold someone we love to the present and not the past, we can begin to heal and nurture the creative energies in that relationship. By that, do I mean that we shouldn't have boundaries with other people? No, we should have boundaries and good guidelines with everyone. That when we allow someone to transform without holding them to judgment, not only have we given ourselves a gift, but we've given them a gift too. When we can see someone in their beauty and in our knowledge of them, but also like we're meeting them for the first time. When we can go to our job and know all the things that we can do, yet treat it like it's our first day. I remember when I was waiting tables, it was a great trick. If I had been working there a couple months and I had screwed up at a table, I said, "I'm sorry, today's my first day." Not only would they forgive me, they'd give me a bigger tip. It's just if they had seen me a few months before, that would be a problem. But to renew ourselves, to take a different route to work, to create a slightly different routine in the morning, to create a little spontaneity in our lives, is to keep us creative. To renew yourself on a regular basis, this is the secret to living a creative and fulfilling life. I love a letter that was released in the year 2000 after Charles Schulz, the creator of Peanuts, passed away. He had written the letter 50 years before to a little girl named Elizabeth Swain. And Elizabeth Swain had written a letter to Schulz complaining about a character that Schulz had created called Charlotte Braun. She was kind of like Lucy on steroids, apparently. So, Snoopy, Charlie Brown, we know the whole Peanuts gang. And so Elizabeth was complaining about this character who only made it in 10 comic strips. But Charles Schulz took the time to write her the following letter. January 5th, 1955. Dear Miss Swain, I am taking your suggestion regarding Charlotte Braun and will eventually discard her. If she appears anymore, it will be in strips that were already completed before I got your letter, or because someone writes in saying that they like her. Remember, however, that you and your friends will have the death of an innocent child on your conscience. Are you prepared to take such responsibility? Thanks for writing, and I hope that future releases will please you. Sincerely, Charles Schulz. On the bottom of the paper, there's little Charlotte, the cartoonist, drawn with an axe in her head. It says, "Big axe," and a caption on the bottom. Why would a grown man write a little girl such a letter? And the answer is creativity, self-renewal, the creative process. And obviously it meant something to the little girl to save it 50 years and then share it with her family after his passing. Several times in Foster's work on how to get ideas, he talks about the great paradox of creativity, and that creativity demands freedom, and yet it demands boundaries. Living a creative life demands freedom, and yet it demands boundaries. And how do we bring those two together? By freedom, he talks about the idea, he says, next time you have problems solving a problem, ask yourself, what assumptions am I making that I don't have to make? What unnecessary limitations am I putting on myself? He also points out that rules are a great way to get ideas. All you have to do is break them. There's so many of us that feel stuck at a place in our life. And better to say than the word stuck sometimes is stale. We feel bored. We feel mediocrity. We feel or might even get the symptom of apathy. And it's so important for me to recognize in my own life that these are not qualities of life. These are qualities of a defective experience. A defective experience that I have brought about because I have judged so incorrectly what I think I see around me. The way I have settled into the way I think things are. the way I've settled the most is in my own self-perspective. Freedom is that ability to say, I may not always control what is happening around me, but I am always at choice on how I can respond with passion and with spirit and with who I am. To bring ourselves to life in ourselves, to again renew ourselves, is to bring such creative life into our circumstances that we can relieve all boredom, all apathy, all mediocrity, to live a creative life again. All that being said, it's important to get out of the box. It's important to become conscious. Notice they say become conscious of the rules before you break them. And yet it's important often to artists as well to work with a deadline, to have a set schedule, a way of working, a modus operandi, a way of being in the world. This is probably in some ways the challenge that the father of Big Fish has. His creativity is actually a really amazing and inspiring thing. The son shares an experience with his father. He said, before he disappeared, he was a father, and he did the things a father was supposed to do. He played some catch, he bought the bike, he packed lunch for the picnics to the mountain overlooking the town, the great city of endless promise, from which he could see the spot where he did first this and then that, and over there where he made his first deal, and there where he kissed that pretty woman, and all the triumph and glory of his short life. This is what he saw when he went there. Not the building or the skyline, not the tree groves or the hospital where they were building the new wing. No, it was his story. The story of his adult life spread out before him like a landscape. And he would take me there and hold me up so I could see, and he would say, someday, son, this will all be yours. So there's this beauty in living in his stories, and yet there's a lack of connection going on because he's not working within the boundaries of being wholly honest in the way that his son is seeking him to be. In being a human who makes mistakes as opposed to a legend who accomplishes great feats. Here is the son longing to know the brokenness, the vulnerability of his father, and yet his father's mind exists on a different plane that is going to keep their connection. God bless him because he's such an entertaining character. There's a joke that the father tells his son in a story which I think actually suits him, the father, and it's a joke. It's not that funny, but it's still pretty good. But it's about a poor man who wants to buy a new suit. So he gathers all the money that he can, goes to the suit store, and he buys the only suit that he can afford. He puts it on and walks outside, and there's just one problem. The suit doesn't fit. The top is too tight, the bottom's too big, one arm's way down here, one leg's way out there, but he's walking as proud as he can be in that suit. He walks by two women. The first woman says, "Oh, that poor man." The second woman says, "Yes, but look at that suit." There's a lot of different metaphors we can use for that, but one of them has to do with living our lives and having the right boundaries. How many of us are just trying to get the suit, but we don't realize that it doesn't suit us? Trying to work on someone else's schedule, trying to do things the way someone else told us we should do them, as opposed to finding our own flow and our own way. I know sometimes we can't do this because our boss tells us to do it that way, or our partner, sometimes the same thing, tells us to do things that particular way. But to find our own flow, to find our own trajectories, to create a momentum in which we can live a creative life. So we want to be a rich woman or a rich man, but we want to find the suit that fits us best. And that's what helps us be our creative self, to match that soul with the right form and right way of being. The son in Big Fish shares about his final moments with his father. His father is starting to worry about his son, as many fathers do upon their own passing. "Don't worry about me, Dad. I'll be okay. I'll be fine." And he says, "I'm a father. I can't help it. A father worries. I am a father," he says, so I don't miss the point. "And as a father, I've tried to teach you a thing or two. I really did try. Maybe I wasn't around so much, but when I was, I tried to teach. So what I want to know is, you think I did a good job?" And as I'm opening my mouth to speak, he says, "Wait, don't answer that." Giving me a smile, giving his best shot. And so he says to me, dying on the bed in front of me, this man, my father, says, "Oh, go on then. Just tell me before I die. Tell me what it is I taught you. Tell me everything it is I've taught you about life so I can go ahead and die and so I won't have to worry so much. Just go ahead and say it." I look into his gray blue dying eyes. We're staring at each other, showing each other our last looks, the faces we'll take with us into eternity. And I'm thinking how I wish I knew him better, how I wish we'd had a life together, wishing my father wasn't such a complete and utter goddamn mystery to me. And I say, there's this man. There's this man, and he's a poor man, and he needs a new suit. But, period. So he's come to understand and live at the level of story with his father. He's sharing the deep spiritual lesson that he's learned from him. True freedom to me isn't really about freedom. True creativity to me, isn't about freedom. And it's really not about boundaries. It's ideally about remembering what's essential about who we are and never forgetting to apply it to our lives. When we know essentially who we are, what our values and virtues, what our spirit is, and apply it with our lives, we are living not in control, but in a creative willingness to live in the right flow and relationship with our lives. So in closing today, I invite us to think about something in our lives that we'd like to make new again. It might be a relationship, it might be our work, it might be an aching body part, something we'd like to renew. And to ask ourselves if we're willing to renew ourselves, renew our perspective, renew our sense of self, not to change the thing, but to affect our relationship in such a way that if change can happen, can occur, it will. We can say we did the best we can to bring ourselves into relationship renewed with a new openness to harmony, a new openness to understanding, a new openness to laughter, to healing, to forgiveness, to whatever it may be. But remember that power. To renew yourself in the essential aspects of your being is to stop pretending to be and act like anybody else. And this is the key transformative power in our lives. To close with some words from Albert Einstein. The important thing is to not stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. One cannot help but be in awe when he contemplates the mysteries of eternity of life, of the marvelous structure of reality. It is enough if one tries merely to comprehend a little of the mystery every day. Never lose a holy curiosity. So I appreciate your time, everyone, this morning. Happy Father's Day again.